I'm going to introduce Patrick Walsh. His father was originally one of our city managers, John Walsh. He was instrumental when Fleischman's closed down. He was instrumental to bring in the resource recovery thing there, the recycling for garbage, and then they set up a whole industrial area. So his father actually was one of the sailors that served at Pearl Harbor at the time. So I'm going to introduce him, and I'll just have a couple of pictures that he already, I scanned them last night. Put them on. Oh, sorry.
Which one do I talk to, Frank?
We're going to talk to this one,
Okay.
and he's going to eavesdrop.
First problem.
He's trying to hang himself.
Yeah, the first problem is trying to get out of the face covering. You know, these are strange times, aren't they? Listen, I of course, this is a very special day. It's the 80th anniversary of the attack of Pearl Harbor. For my family, it's a particularly special day because my dad, John Walsh, was, as Frank said, at Pearl Harbor. He turned 20 just 3 days before the attack. So if you do the math, he died in 1988, but his 100th birthday would have been on Saturday. So I just got done celebrating my dad's 100th birthday, the anniversary of his birth, and now, of course, a very somber, solemn celebration, commemoration of what happened on December 7th. So I just wanted to give you a very brief idea of my dad's experience at Pearl Harbor. Dad was born in Peekskill and raised here. His mom and dad were Pat and Mary Walsh. They lived down on Smith Street, and they had 9 sons and daughters. They had a big family. 3 of my uncles served in Europe during World War II. My dad served in the Pacific. So he actually enlisted in January of 1941 and began his service. And you know, when you join the Navy, they send you to school to begin with, and you learn a skill that's essential to the Navy service. My dad became an aviation machinist's mate, which is a military way of saying he fixed aircraft. He was able to take apart a Curtiss engine and do everything that was necessary to keep the planes flying. He particularly worked on something called the Catalina PBY, which was known as a flying boat, because they could actually land on water. And so they were used for rescue missions and things like that, and for patrol. And so Dad went in the service in January. In the summertime, he was stationed in San Diego. And at 19 years old, my dad was real happy to be in San Diego. He said years later it was one of the most beautiful places on the planet, and he was so happy. And you would think, today we think of Hawaii as, wow, Hawaii is like paradise, Then Hawaii was still a territory. It wasn't a state yet. And so there's a bit of the Wild West about it. When my dad got the word that they were shipping out to go to Hawaii, he was a little nervous about it. It was like, well, okay, They left San Diego he and his group left San Diego in October of 1941. October 17th, they arrived in Pearl Harbor on November 1st. So you talk about, history, they just got there just in time for my dad to have his birthday on the 4th, and on the 7th to have people flying overhead dropping bombs trying to kill him, which is an interesting way to spend your 20th birthday. I just wanted to, I was fortunate enough to have a middle school teacher when I was in my teen years who gave us this assignment, interview someone about a historic event. And I said, wow, I got this. I know someone who lived through a historic event. So I was able to interview my dad, and so I have just little brief snippets of that very briefly. He was at Ford Island on the day of the attack, and the men who were stationed there who were responsible for maintaining the Catalinas, the PBY flying boats, they were up early that morning. They saw the pilots off, and they went to the shop to do the regular things that aircraft mechanics do. And of course, you know, early that morning, the attack began. This is what my dad had to say. He said, on December 7th, 1941, I was at Pearl Harbor when the Japanese attacked. I was in a patrol squadron, and that morning we had what was known as dawn patrol. And we were up bright and early, and when the first bombs dropped, we thought it was a munition dump exploding. And we ran towards the explosion. And then, of course, we'd seen the planes, and we saw what was happening, and we decided we better run the other way. Now, because most of the Catalinas, the PBYs at Ford Island, had gone off on dawn patrol, they actually escaped the attack. But they weren't armed at that point in the war. It wasn't until later that they started carrying armaments. So although they avoided the Japanese attack, they had no way of stopping it or doing anything particularly to help. But afterward, those Catalinas at Ford Island were some of the only flyable patrol boats, patrol planes that were left at that point. While the planes, though, you know, the planes avoided the attack, the people who were on the ground found themselves in a different situation. And what my dad said about that part of it was, he said, you know, it went on for most of the hour and a half of what we might call the breakfast period. But actually for us, it was an all-day and an all-night affair because we didn't know if anyone was coming back. But it was a total and complete surprise. It did an awful lot of damage. And of course, we lost a lot of our people. And although I would hesitate to add anything to my dad's account or speak for him in any way, it struck me in thinking about what this day means that, you know, we gather on days like this and we commemorate very large events in history, and we think of them in terms, of course, of how it affects our entire lives as Americans. For someone like my dad, you know, Pearl Harbor Day was an actual day in his life when he got up in the morning and went to work and started doing what he was doing, and all of a sudden, you know, there was something terrible happening. For him, it was the first day of the beginning of a very, very difficult period, and for every American it was. For some people, like the guys on the Arizona, a lot of them were 17, 18, 19 years old. It was their last day. And so when I think of days like this, when I honor veterans, I pray for veterans, and I think of the incredible things that all of our veterans have done throughout history in World War II, in Korea, in Vietnam, in Iraq, in Afghanistan, in all of the conflicts that they've been involved in peacetime, when they do so much to serve, to protect our freedoms, and to make life better for us. Behind every great big historic event, there are millions of these little stories. And the people who live through them will tell you, you know, my story isn't important. You know, it's important to my son, it's important to my kids, it's important to, you know, my story is only important because of what it meant in a larger sense. And I can tell you that my dad, when he looked back on that year, he said, I had 2 birthdays in 1941. I had one on the 4th when I turned 20, and I had one on the 7th because I was still around to be there for the 8th. And as much as he would, you know, he would hesitate to talk about Pearl Harbor because of the sacredness of it, of the people who were killed, he would often talk about Midway, which was the turning point, which he was also involved in. He remained in the service until November of 1945. He left the service, came back to Peekskill, eventually worked for the city of Peekskill for many, many years. He took a little detour, went to St. John's in the city and met my mom, got married, had Mike and I, his 2 sons, which were his pride and joy. And I don't think it's an exaggeration to say he was grateful for every moment after Pearl Harbor. And of course, you being here today is such a wonderful way to be grateful for all the veterans who have been through similar experiences, all the people that protect us and look out for us. Thank you so much for sharing this moment with me. I wish you all wonderful moments always to come. Thank you. Thank you.
Just a follow-up. This is John Walsh right here. So there's, can you see? That's John Walsh right here. That's his father.
Smile.
So there's one street
Always
goes from
smiling.
Louisa Street to Buchanan Village line. That's John Walsh Boulevard. That was where he's named for. In fact, for the building, I think he was city manager when this was being built. This actual building in the police station area. That was excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely excellent.
Thank you.